Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Scary Interesting. Today, we're exploring some of the worst disasters in history. This video dives into two remarkably similar events that had drastically different outcomes, all because of one pivotal individual. In the second story, even though everything was done by the book, those involved couldn't have known that a hidden danger was lying in wait. This tragedy would go on to be so impactful that it changed procedures still followed hundreds of years later. As always, viewer discretion is strongly advised. Intro music fades in and out. Let's begin. Originally constructed in 1793, the HMS Tribune already had quite the story by the time it officially joined the British Royal Navy in September of 1797. Built by the French, the Tribune began its life as part of France's fleet during the tumultuous French Revolutionary Wars. By 1796, the Tribune was one of several warships navigating the Irish Isles of Scilly. On June 8, this group of ships was spotted by two British vessels, sparking an intense chase. The Tribune, desperate to escape, pushed its limits, but after an exhausting 10-hour pursuit, the British ships outperformed it. A barrage of cannon fire from the British guns crippled the Tribune, destroying much of its mast and rendering the ship immobile. With no choice left, the Tribune surrendered and was promptly captured. 2 days later, a British crew boarded the vessel and sailed it to Portsmouth for refitting. After several months of work, the Tribune was officially recommissioned as a British warship on April 29, 1797. Later that year, the ship was assigned to a convoy tasked with escorting resupply ships to Quebec and Newfoundland. Commanded by Captain Scory Barker, the HMS Tribune departed from Torquay, a town near England's southern coast, on September 22. Initially, the voyage seemed to be progressing smoothly, but roughly 12 days away from Halifax, the Tribune began to fall behind the rest of the convoy. Eventually, it lost sight of the other ships altogether. Despite this setback, Captain Scory pressed on, determined to reach Halifax and rejoin the convoy there. Unfortunately, that reunion never happened, but the Tribune did manage to arrive just outside Halifax Harbor on November 16. Now, Halifax Harbor was infamous for its challenging navigation. Entering it safely required not only skill but also an intimate knowledge of the area's coastal terrain and the treacherous currents in the channel. Because of this, it was standard practice for ships to wait outside the approach for a local pilot to board and guide them into port. As an experienced captain, Scory followed this custom and ordered the Tribune to anchor while they awaited assistance. But as the crew prepared to settle in, the ship's master, John Clegg, approached Captain Scory with a bold proposal. Clegg confidently assured his captain that he had the expertise necessary to navigate Halifax Harbor himself. To back up his claim, he pointed to a previous successful docking of a 44-gun ship in the same harbor, as well as his familiarity with the region's challenges. He also noted the favorable wind conditions and emphasized that another officer on board, John Cozy, could provide additional guidance, as he had once lived in the Halifax area. Initially hesitant, Captain Scory eventually allowed himself to be convinced by Clegg's argument. Against his better judgment, he entrusted the navigation to Clegg. With that decision made, Scory handed over the wheel and headed below deck to gather paperwork he intended to take ashore. Meanwhile, Clegg took control of the Tribune, issuing orders to the crew while Cozy stood by, ready to assist. The atmosphere on board seemed calm and focused as they prepared to make their way into the harbor. But what followed next would become one of the most haunting maritime disasters of the time. A tragedy born of overconfidence, misjudgment, and the unpredictable forces of nature. With Clegg at the helm, the Tribune began its approach to Halifax Harbor. The ship's sails were adjusted, and the crew worked in synchronized precision, following Clegg's commands. The wind, as Clegg had noted, was favorable, gently pushing the ship forward. On the surface, it seemed like a straightforward task, one that would soon bring the long voyage to a close. But Halifax Harbor was not forgiving. Known for its narrow channels and hidden shoals, it was a place where even seasoned pilots could falter. The dangers lurking beneath its deceptively calm waters were not always visible, and a single misstep could spell disaster. As the Tribune moved closer to the harbor entrance, the mood aboard the ship began to shift. Some of the crew, familiar with Halifax's reputation, exchanged uneasy glances. They knew the risks of attempting to navigate these waters without an experienced local pilot. Yet, their concerns remained unspoken. After all, Clegg had assured them, and Captain Scory, that he was capable. Below deck, Scory was gathering his papers, unaware of the growing tension above. He had placed his trust in Clegg, a decision he believed to be justified based on the man's confidence and past experience. But trust alone was not enough to counter the treacherous challenges ahead. As the ship pressed on, Clegg began issuing more urgent commands. The currents were stronger than anticipated, and the Tribune's movements became less predictable. He struggled to keep the vessel on course, his earlier confidence now giving way to visible strain. John Cozy, observing the situation, stepped in to assist. He pointed out landmarks and provided input based on his familiarity with the area, but it quickly became clear that things were not going as planned. The ship's position was drifting dangerously close to a shallow area known to locals as the Devil's Shoal.